Some betrayals happen in silence, quietly like dust, settling on a mirror, until one day you suddenly realize you've been looking at life through a blur for far too long. And then there are betrayals that explode in the most luxurious places in America, beneath crystal chandeliers, amid polite applause, behind smiles measured in stock's power and reputation. This is the story of Sophia Carter, a woman who is erased from her own life in the most refined way possible. Not with violence, not with shouting, but with indifference. And one day she decided that if she had been turned into a shadow, she would become a light so bright no one could look away. Morning sunlight poured through Italian silk curtains in the Carter townhouse on the Upper East Side of New York. The warmth was perfect, painting everything into a picture of privilege: polished wooden floors, fresh flowers replaced daily, the faint scent of Earl Grey, and original artworks on the walls, never reproductions. But Sophia felt no warmth at all. She sat at her vanity, an heirloom from her mother's side of the family, dark walnut, with a bronze-framed mirror, a place that had once reflected women who were cherished and adored. Now it reflected her. 32 years old, golden hair brushed smooth, porcelain skin, steel blue eyes, deep and calm, almost unnervingly so, as if they had endured too much to be startled anymore. In Upper East Side circles, Sophia was described as beautiful, a classic beauty, effortless, refined. Never trying too hard, she dressed impeccably, spoke at the right moments, smiled when expected. To the outside world, she had everything. Except for one thing, she no longer felt seen. Sophia lifted her hand to her neck where William used to kiss her in passing. She couldn't remember when that habit disappeared. It hadn't vanished with a bang. It evaporated quietly like water under the sun. No sound, just absence. From the hallway came brisk, confident footsteps, the sound of a man who always had a schedule and always walked as if the world were chasing him. Sophia knew immediately. William Carter. The door opened. William entered the room like a cold draft, dressed in a tailored suit. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark brown hair, perfectly cut, an expensive watch gleaming on his wrist, and the masculine cologne that once made Sophia feel safe, now distant. He adjusted his tie as he spoke, never looking at her. "I'll be out late tonight." His voice was flat, the tone of someone reading an agenda. "Dinner with investors." Sophia turned slowly in her chair. She didn't rush. Rushing had taught her nothing over the past 3 years, except how desperation shows. "William," she said softly. He still didn't look at her. "Today is our anniversary." William paused just a fraction of a second, his hand already on the door handle. For that brief moment, Sophia's heart reacted like a wounded animal, still hoping even while bracing for pain. She waited for him to turn around, to apologize, to smile. Instead, William exhaled irritation slipping into the sound. "Right," he said. "Ask Helen to make a reservation for tomorrow. I can't tonight." Then he opened the door. "Don't wait up." The door closed. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to make something slam shut inside Sophia's chest. She remained still, staring at the space where William had stood. 3 years earlier, they had stood before a church surrounded by light and congratulations, stepping into a marriage society pages called a perfect match. William Carter, young partner at a powerful Manhattan investment firm, well-connected family, a brilliant future. Sophia, Columbia educated, immersed in art and philanthropy, elegant, impeccable background. They looked like a carefully staged photograph. When they were dating, William had looked at her as if she were the only thing in the room. He listened, remembered details, texted her the moment she went quiet. But after marriage, things changed, not suddenly, but gradually. And that was what made it dangerous. First, breakfast disappeared because of early meetings. Then business trips appeared out of nowhere. Then late calls. Then casual touches faded. Then conversations stopped being shared. Eventually, they lived in the same house like polite strangers, civil, distant, cold. Sophia had asked herself every possible question. Was she boring? Not interesting enough. Too quiet. Too demanding. She tried everything. New hairstyles, different perfumes, dresses. William once loved. She booked tables at restaurants he mentioned, bought opera tickets, planned evenings just for them. William always responded in the most effective way: to kill hope, polite gratitude, empty eyes, as if she were trying to light a fire in a room that no longer had oxygen. The door opened again, softly this time. Helen Brooks entered carrying a tray with tea and small pastries. She had managed the Carter household for over 20 years, a woman in her early 60s. Gray hair neatly pinned, kind eyes that missed nothing. "Morning tea, ma'am," Helen said, setting the tray by the window. She watched Sophia for a moment, then hesitated. "May I say something?" Sophia nodded, her gaze still on the mirror. Helen stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "You're an extraordinary woman, Mrs. Carter." Sophia swallowed. Helen continued. "Any man should consider himself lucky. And if Mr. Carter doesn't, then perhaps the problem isn't you." The words struck a wound Sophia had been wrapping with temporary bandages for months. She turned barely louder than a whisper. "Helen, do you think there's someone else?" Helen was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, she no longer sounded like a housekeeper, but like a mother. "Ma'am, there are things a woman knows, and there are things she has to confirm with her own eyes." A chill ran down Sophia's spine. She wanted to ask more, but Helen stopped there. Some truths Helen knew would break a woman if handed to her too easily. Helen simply placed a gentle hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Whatever you decide, don't let anyone make you disappear." Then she left, closing the door quietly behind her. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Sophia reviewed charity correspondence, rearranged schedules for a small exhibition, answered the kind of social calls she knew by heart. Dinners, fundraisers, conversations that never quite meant anything. Everything felt like it was happening on a screen while she stood somewhere outside her own body. At dusk, she stood in her study looking out over Manhattan. One by one, the city lights came on, each window glowing with someone else's life. Sophia saw her reflection in the glass, thin, faded, blending into the skyline. And then the thought came, not loud, not emotional, but cold and undeniable. If she didn't learn the truth, she would slowly disappear inside doubt. She couldn't keep living like someone begging for eye contact just to confirm she existed. Sophia turned and walked toward the stairs leading down to William's office, a room she rarely entered. Not because it was locked, but because her presence there always seemed to irritate him, as if she were touching something that belonged only to him. She stood before the door, hand on the handle. Inside, everything probably still looked fine. Inside, William's real life might be waiting. She inhaled and opened the door. William's office was his private world. Brown leather, dark wood, the scent of expensive liquor, low amber lighting, contracts stacked neatly, files aligned, a closed laptop resting like a secret. Sophia stepped forward. Her heart pounded, but not with fear. It felt more like her body was warning her, this moment will change your life. She opened the laptop. A password field appeared. Sophia stared at it like a second locked door. She tried the obvious: William's birthday, the firm's name, his alma mater. Nothing. Each failure sank deeper into her chest. Then she stopped. A memory surfaced, how they first met at a gallery opening in Soho. William had arrived late, stood beside her, said something that made her laugh instantly. She typed the date. The screen unlocked. Sophia froze. A strange pain bloomed in her chest because even his password was built from something that belonged to her, and yet he could still treat her as if she didn't exist. She opened the inbox and saw a name: Vanessa Moore. Email after email, endless, subject lines that made her blood run cold. Paris, I miss you last night, Savoy plan. Sophia covered her mouth. She knew before reading that she had crossed a line, and there was no going back. She stared at the screen for a long moment, unmoving. The name Vanessa Moore glowed softly against the white background, innocent in typography, devastating in meaning. Sophia lowered herself into William's chair, as if her legs had suddenly forgotten their purpose. The leather was still warm from his body, and that small detail made her stomach turn. She clicked the first email, then the second, then the third. At first, the messages were almost harmless, professional, polished, corporate language wrapped in courtesy. Great meeting you in Paris. Looking forward to continuing this discussion. The merger timeline looks promising. Vanessa Moore was listed as a senior consultant, strategic development, international markets, French-American, educated, sophisticated. Everything about her profile sounded reasonable, respectable. Sophia almost laughed at how badly she wanted that to be the truth. She scrolled. The tone shifted gradually like a tide pulling away from shore. The emails grew longer, less formal. I enjoyed our dinner more than I expected. That wine you chose was dangerous. You have a way of making the room disappear. Sophia's fingers trembled on the trackpad. She scrolled again. Dates appeared. Hotels, flights, Paris, Florence, Chicago, San Francisco. Trips William had explained away as last-minute meetings, conferences he had attended alone, nights he had called late, voice distracted, telling her he was exhausted. Sophia felt something tighten inside her chest, not sharp pain but pressure, like the air was slowly being pulled out of the room. Then she opened an email titled, "About Your Wife." Her breath stopped. She read it once without comprehension, then again and again. "Vanessa, you asked about Sophia, and honestly, I don't know how to answer anymore. She's a shadow in my life. Beautiful, yes, but empty, decorative. She doesn't challenge me. She doesn't excite me. It's like living with an expensive porcelain piece, fragile, lifeless. With you, I feel alive again." Sophia's vision blurred, not from tears, from shock. Each word felt deliberate, considered, written without hesitation. She hadn't imagined this, hadn't exaggerated, hadn't been too sensitive. This was how William saw her. She read the email again, slower this time. Porcelain, decorative, lifeless. Sophia closed her eyes. For a fleeting, dangerous moment, a thought crossed her mind, quiet, seductive, final. What if I simply disappear? What if she went upstairs, took the sleeping pills in the medicine cabinet, and let this end quietly, just like she had been erased? The thought scared her. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt calm. She stood abruptly, pushing the chair back, and walked into the adjacent bathroom. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Pale eyes, wide lips parted as if she had forgotten how to breathe. She leaned over the sink and retched. Her body rejected the truth before her mind could fully accept it. Cold water splashed against her face as she forced herself to look again. "This is not who you are," she told her reflection. But the emails weren't finished. Back at the desk, Sophia continued scrolling like someone pressing on a bruise, compelled to feel every ounce of pain. She found photographs. Vanessa Moore was striking, dark hair falling in loose waves, warm, expressive eyes, a confidence that radiated effortlessly through the screen. There were pictures of her and William together, laughing in a Parisian cafe, walking hand in hand near the Seine, sitting close in dimly lit restaurants where candles blurred into golden halos. In every photo, William looked different, relaxed, open, happy. Sophia stared at one image longer than the others. William's arm was wrapped around Vanessa's waist, his head tilted toward her in a way Sophia hadn't seen in years. It wasn't lust that broke her, it was familiarity, intimacy. He had given another woman the version of himself Sophia had been begging to see. Her chest tightened again, but this time something else stirred beneath the pain. Anger. Not explosive. Controlled. Quiet. She opened another email. This one was recent, dated just 2 days earlier. The gala. Her heart sank before she finished reading. The Foundation Gala in New York is next week. Sophia will obviously be there. These social obligations are unavoidable. But you'll be there too, right? It will be interesting to have you in my world for once, and perhaps it's time to stop hiding. I can't live this lie forever. Sophia's pulse roared in her ears. She scrolled to Vanessa's reply. Of course I'll be there. It's time, William. You can introduce me properly, no more secrets. I imagine your wife will finally understand what she's been replaced by. It will be educational for her. Sophia felt the room tilt. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated humiliation. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning to destroy her publicly, to turn her into a spectacle in front of donors, politicians, media figures, to reduce her to a footnote. Sophia closed the laptop slowly. Her hands no longer shook. Something inside her had shifted. The sadness didn't disappear, but it moved aside, making room for clarity. She understood now. This wasn't about Vanessa being better. This wasn't about Sophia being inadequate. This was about William's cowardice, about his need to rewrite the narrative so he could be the hero of his own story. Sophia stood in the middle of the office, surrounded by the symbols of William's success, his books, his awards, his tailored world. And for the first time in years, she saw herself clearly. She wasn't porcelain, she wasn't empty, she was intelligent, educated, multilingual. She had curated exhibitions, built charitable programs, spoken in rooms full of powerful people long before she became Mrs. Carter. She had shrunk herself to make William comfortable, and he had mistaken her silence for nothingness. Sophia returned to the desk. Carefully, methodically, she copied everything. Emails, photos, travel records, financial details of trips paid for through joint accounts. She saved them to a secure drive. Then she erased all traces of her presence. When she finally closed the laptop, it was as if she had sealed a chapter. Upstairs, the house was silent. William wouldn't be home until late. Sophia climbed the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. By the time she reached the bedroom, a plan was already forming, not fueled by rage, but by resolve. William wanted a stage. He wanted an audience. He wanted a grand reveal at the gala. Sophia smiled faintly. Then he would have one, but the story would not unfold the way he expected. Not this time, and not ever again. Sophia didn't sleep that night, not because of panic, but because something inside her had finally woken up. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the city. For the first time in months, her mind wasn't looping questions like, why wasn't I enough? Or what did I do wrong? Those questions felt irrelevant now. The truth had stripped them of power. William hadn't drifted away because she was lacking. He had drifted away because he was weak. That realization didn't soften the pain, but it reorganized it, like furniture being moved in a room that finally made sense. By morning, Sophia had made a decision. She would not confront him. She would not cry. She would not beg for explanations already written in emails. She would prepare. The next few days unfolded with an eerie calm. Sophia moved through the house with quiet precision, like someone relearning their own body. She spoke to William when necessary, polite, distant, perfectly composed. If he noticed anything different, he didn't say. He was distracted, checking his phone too often, smiling at messages he didn't explain, leaving the room to take calls. Sophia watched him the way one watches a storm from behind glass, not in fear, but in observation. Every morning after William left, she returned to the study. She reviewed the files she had saved. Not obsessively, strategically. She wasn't gathering ammunition out of anger, she was gathering certainty, and certainty was power. On the third day, she made her first call. Evelyn, it's Sophia Carter. There was a pause on the other end, then warmth. Sophia. It's been too long. Evelyn Hart was not just a designer, she was a creator of statements. Women didn't wear Evelyn's work to look beautiful, they wore it to be remembered. I need a dress, Sophia said calmly. For next week. The gala. Evelyn asked. Yes. Another pause. This one thoughtful. And what do you want the dress to say? Sophia looked out the window at the city skyline. I wanted to say, she replied, that I'm not disappearing. The atelier in Soho smelled like silk and ambition. Mannequins stood like silent witnesses draped in unfinished masterpieces. Rolls of fabric lined the walls, velvet satin chiffon colors ranging from midnight blue to bone white. Evelyn studied Sophia carefully, circling her slowly like an artist assessing a canvas. You've changed, she said at last. Sophia met her gaze. I'm remembering. Evelyn smiled faintly. They chose fabric together, not something loud, not something pleading for attention, something controlled, architectural, elegant in a way that didn't ask permission. Deep midnight black, clean lines, an open back that suggested confidence rather than exposure. This isn't revenge, Evelyn said quietly as she pinned fabric. This is reclamation. Sophia nodded. Exactly. But the transformation wasn't only external. Each morning, Sophia woke early and went to the private gym she had ignored for years. Not to punish her body, but to reconnect with it. She ran, she lifted, she breathed. With every movement, she felt something return, strength, balance, presence. She practiced standing differently, walking differently, shoulders back, chin level, steps unhurried. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was reintroducing herself to the world. In the afternoons, she met with people she had gradually distanced herself from during her marriage: curators, philanthropists, old friends. Conversations flowed easily without tension. She laughed, genuinely surprised by the sound of it. One afternoon over coffee, a former colleague said, "It's good to have you back." Sophia smiled. She realized she had been gone long before anyone noticed. Helen watched all of this quietly. One evening, as Sophia stood in front of the mirror adjusting a jacket, Helen spoke from the doorway. "You used to stand like that," she said, "before the marriage." Sophia glanced at her reflection. Strong, grounded. "I forgot." She admitted. Helen shook her head gently. "No, you were taught to forget." There was no bitterness in her tone, only truth. William noticed the change eventually, not because Sophia announced it, but because absence had been replaced by presence. He found himself watching her across the room, noticing how she spoke less but with more weight, how she no longer waited for him to finish sentences, how she didn't adjust her schedule around his. One night, as he buttoned his coat to leave, he paused. "You seem different," he said casually. Sophia looked up from her book. "I am." He hesitated as if expecting more. She returned to reading. That silence unsettled him more than any accusation ever could. The final fitting took place 2 days before the gala. Sophia stepped onto the platform as Evelyn adjusted the hem. The dress fit her perfectly, not just her body, but her state of mind. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, not because she looked unfamiliar, but because she looked whole. Evelyn stepped back, eyes shining. "They won't see the dress first," she said. "They'll see you." Sophia nodded. That night she stood alone in her bedroom, the city glowing beyond the windows. The gala was approaching. William believed he controlled the narrative. Vanessa believed she was about to step into the spotlight. Neither of them understood what was coming. Sophia did. She wasn't going to confront the past. She was going to end it and step forward alone, unafraid, unforgettable. The night of the gala arrived with surgical precision. New York was dressed for spectacle. Black sedans lined the street outside the Plaza Hotel, their polished surfaces reflecting camera flashes and chandelier light. The air buzzed with quiet excitement, the kind that only exists where money, influence, and appearances intersect. Inside the Carter townhouse, everything was silent. Sophia stood at the top of the marble staircase alone. The dress waited for her on the bed, midnight black, sculpted and fluid at once. It didn't sparkle. It didn't shout. It didn't need to. She stepped into it slowly, letting the fabric settle against her skin like a second self. When she turned toward the mirror, she paused. The woman looking back at her was calm, not numb, not hardened, clear. Sophia fastened the final clasp, then reached for the pearl earrings that had once belonged to her mother. They were understated, dark, luminous, impossible to ignore when the light caught them just right. She didn't rush. There was no one left to impress. Downstairs, William waited. He stood in the entry hall, immaculate in a tailored tuxedo, checking his watch for the third time in 2 minutes. His phone vibrated in his hand, another message he didn't answer immediately. He was restless, anticipatory. This night mattered to him. He looked up sharply when he heard movement on the stairs. "Sophia," he called, irritation slipping into his voice. "We're running late. I'm coming," she replied evenly. Her heels touched the marble. William turned and froze. For a brief, almost imperceptible moment, the world seemed to recalibrate around him. His mouth parted slightly. His hand dropped from his phone. The orchestra's final note faded into silence. Every conversation in the ballroom slowed, then stopped altogether. Margaret Whitmore stood poised at the center of the room, champagne flute raised just high enough to command attention. She didn't rush. She never did. Power at her level was never loud. "My friends," she began, her voice warm and measured, "before we continue the evening, I'd like to offer a brief toast." The room leaned in. Sophia felt William stiffen somewhere behind her. She didn't turn. "Tonight," Margaret continued, "we are surrounded by extraordinary couples, partners in philanthropy and influence and legacy. But there is one couple I'd like to acknowledge in particular." William's pulse hammered in his ears. Sophia and William Carter. Margaret said clearly, who are celebrating their 3rd wedding anniversary this week. A polite wave of applause followed, refined, restrained. Sophia smiled, not because she was pleased, because she was ready. Margaret tilted her head toward William. William, perhaps you'd like to say a few words about your wife. The trap closed softly, perfectly. A server appeared with a microphone. William took it as if it were suddenly much heavier than it looked. His hand trembled just enough to be noticeable. He began, then paused, forcing a smile. Sophia is remarkable. The word echoed oddly. She's intelligent, elegant, admired by everyone here. I'm fortunate. The room murmured approvingly, though the sound was thinner now. Sophia stepped forward. Thank you, William, she said gently, her voice calm, unwavering. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, brief, precise, a goodbye disguised as affection. Somewhere across the room, Vanessa Moore's expression cracked. She had reached her limit. With deliberate steps, she crossed the floor. Red silk cutting through the muted palette of the gala like a warning flare. William, she said brightly, too brightly, you promised me a dance. The room froze. Phones appeared not raised but ready. A collective breath was held. William turned slowly, his face draining of color as he looked from Vanessa to Sophia. His mouth opened, then closed again. Sophia turned to Vanessa with composed curiosity. Oh, she said pleasantly, you must be Vanessa Moore. Vanessa blinked. Yes, Sophia smiled. William has spoken about you, quite often actually. William's grip tightened on the microphone. Vanessa laughed nervously. Has he? Yes. Sophia continued, especially in his emails. The temperature in the room dropped. Vanessa's smile faltered. In fact, Sophia added, her tone still mild. I've seen the photos too. Paris suited you both. The George V, if I remember correctly. A ripple of shock swept through the guests. William whispered hoarsely, Sophia, please. She didn't look at him. Margaret Whitmore stepped closer, her presence suddenly sharp. This is unexpected, she said coolly. Sophia nodded. It is, but I believe honesty is best, especially when deception has been planned so carefully. She turned to the room. For 3 years, Sophia said, her voice carrying effortlessly, I was made to feel invisible in my own marriage. I was told directly and indirectly that I was dull, unchallenging, decorative. She paused. Tonight reminded me of something important. Silence. I am none of those things. The room held still. I also discovered that my husband has been conducting an affair with Miss Moore for 8 months. She continued, complete with international trips, shared finances, and plans to reveal her publicly this evening. Gasps, whispers, sharp intakes of breath. Vanessa shook her head. This is ridiculous. You're bitter. You're trying to humiliate me. Margaret Whitmore's gaze snapped to her. You've said quite enough, Miss Moore. William tried to speak again, desperation creeping into his voice. I don't know what she's talking about. The betrayal landed harder than any confession could have. Vanessa stared at him, stunned. William Sophia watched the moment carefully, the precise instant when Vanessa understood she had never been protected, only used. Security approached discreetly. Miss Moore, Margaret said softly, I believe it's time for you to leave. Vanessa's face flushed, then paled. She looked around for support and found none. She was escorted out amid hushed commentary and sidelong glances. Sophia turned back to the room. With immediate effect, she said clearly, I will be filing for divorce. My marriage to William Carter is over. William took a step toward her. Sophia, please. She met his eyes for the first time that night. I loved you, she said evenly, but you chose to erase me. Her composure cracked just enough to let truth through. You don't lose people all at once, William. You lose them inch by inch. Then she turned and walked away. The crowd parted instinctively, as if recognizing something final. Behind her, William stood alone, no longer powerful, no longer admired, just visible at last. And it was too late. Sophia descended the staircase slowly, each step unhurried, the dress flowing with deliberate grace. The chandelier above cast soft light over her hair, her shoulders the open line of her back. She didn't look at him until she reached the bottom. William swallowed. You look incredible, he said, voice quieter now, uncertain. Sophia met his gaze. Thank you, that was all. No nervous smile, No seeking approval, just acknowledgement. For the first time in months, William really looked at his wife. And for the first time in months, doubt flickered across his face. The drive to the hotel passed in strained silence. The city lights blurred past the windows as the car moved through Manhattan. William glanced at Sophia more than once, as if trying to reconcile the woman beside him with the version he had rewritten in his mind. She stared ahead, composed, hands folded lightly in her lap. She felt steady, not triumphant, not angry, steady. When the car pulled up to the entrance, the crowd of photographers shifted instantly. Cameras lifted. Whispers rippled. William stepped out first, instinctively reaching back to offer his hand. Sophia accepted it not because she needed it, but because it was appropriate. As she emerged from the car, the reaction was immediate. The murmurs stopped, then resumed, louder, sharper, filled with surprise. Flashbulbs erupted. Sophia walked forward, as if she had done this 1,000 times because she had. But something was different now. Heads turned. Conversations paused. People weren't just noticing her. They were recalibrating their opinions. A reporter leaned toward another and whispered, "That's William Carter's wife." Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was electric. Crystal chandeliers cascaded light across marble floors. Tables were adorned with white orchids and gold accents. A string orchestra played softly, weaving elegance into the air. The room was filled with donors, politicians, media figures, faces that mattered. And when Sophia entered the room, adjusted, she felt it not as validation but as recognition. Margaret Whitmore spotted her almost immediately. The older woman, resplendent in deep emerald silk, approached with a smile that carried weight. "Sophia," she said warmly, kissing both her cheeks. "You look radiant." "Thank you, Margaret." Margaret held her at arm's length for a moment, studying her with sharp, approving eyes. "It suits you," she added quietly. Confidence. William shifted beside them, suddenly uneasy. Margaret's gaze flicked to him briefly, then back to Sophia, dismissive in its subtlety. "I hope you'll save me a dance later," Margaret said. "I want everyone to see you." Sophia smiled. "I'd love that." As Margaret moved on, Sophia felt it again, that subtle shift in energy. She was no longer an accessory. She was a presence. Across the room, Vanessa Moore had arrived. She stood near the bar, surrounded by a small cluster of admirers, her red gown dramatic and deliberate. She laughed a little too loudly, scanning the room as if searching for something or someone. Her eyes found William. Then they slid to Sophia. Vanessa's smile tightened just slightly. She had expected many things tonight. She had not expected this. William noticed Vanessa watching and cleared his throat. "I should greet a few people," he said, already stepping away. Sophia nodded, unbothered. Of course. She watched him cross the room toward Vanessa, his pace betraying a nervous urgency. When he reached her, Vanessa's expression softened into something intimate, familiar. Sophia observed from a distance. She felt no jealousy, only clarity. Around her, conversations flowed. People approached, some she recognized, others she didn't. Compliments were offered, invitations extended. She danced, she laughed, she existed. And with every passing minute, the tension in the room thickened. Eyes darted between Sophia, William, and Vanessa. Something was building. The orchestra shifted into a slower piece. Margaret Whitmore reappeared near the center of the room, lifting a glass gently to catch attention. Sophia felt it then, the moment before the storm. Whatever was about to happen, there was no stopping it now. The aftermath was swift and merciless. By morning, the story had already taken shape in the circles that mattered most. Not the gossip blogs, not the sensational headlines, but private messages, boardroom conversations, quiet phone calls that went unanswered. In New York's upper tiers, reputations didn't collapse loudly. They simply stopped being invited into rooms. William Carter learned this within days. Meetings were postponed indefinitely. Concerns were raised. Partnerships were quietly reconsidered. Men who once called him a rising force now offered him polite distance. Others offered nothing at all. The gala hadn't just exposed an affair, it had exposed character. And in that world, character was currency. Sophia, meanwhile, woke the next morning to a stillness she hadn't felt in years. No dread, no waiting, no silent calculations about what mood the house might be in, just clarity. She sat at the breakfast table with a cup of coffee, sunlight spilling across the floor, and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Relief. Helen stood nearby, watching her quietly. "You were extraordinary last night," Helen said finally. Sophia smiled softly. "I wasn't extraordinary." She paused. "I was honest." Within the week, the divorce papers were filed. Sophia asked for nothing. No financial settlements, no public statements, no retaliation. Only one request. She would return to her maiden name, Sophia Reynolds. When William read that detail, something inside him finally broke. It wasn't the loss of money, it wasn't the loss of status, it was the realization that she didn't want anything tied to him anymore, not even his name. William tried, of course. He sent messages, left voicemails, wrote emails he never would have written before, long emotional, filled with regret. Sophia read none of them. She didn't block him out of anger. She blocked him out of completion. Vanessa Moore left New York less than 48 hours after the gala. Her consulting contracts evaporated. Invitations disappeared. The city that had once felt like opportunity now felt like judgment. She returned to Europe quietly. There were no farewell parties, no defenders, only the knowledge that she had bet on a man who folded the moment he was exposed. 3 months later, Sophia stood in the East Wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The exhibition she had helped curate, Women in Power, was opening to international acclaim. Donors praised her vision. Critics called it quietly revolutionary. She moved through the gallery with confidence, answering questions, engaging with guests fully present. It was there she met Alexander Reed. He wasn't flashy. He didn't interrupt. He listened. Their conversations were unforced, intellectual, warm. For the first time in a long time, Sophia felt no need to explain herself or shrink. Their relationship unfolded slowly, without games, without imbalance, with respect. William, on the other hand, moved into a smaller apartment downtown. The townhouse was sold. Helen resigned. One evening alone with a glass of wine he didn't enjoy. William stared at an old photo from their wedding day. Sophia had been radiant, open, hopeful, alive. He finally understood what he had destroyed. Not a marriage, a woman. Months later, he called her one last time. Sophia answered, not out of longing but closure. "I understand now," William said quietly. "I see what I did." Sophia listened without interruption. Then she replied calmly, "Understanding doesn't undo erasure. And I no longer live in that story." She wished him well, and meant it. A year later, Sophia married Alexander in a small private ceremony surrounded by art light and people who truly knew her. No headlines, no spectacle, just joy. As the evening settled and the city lights reflected across the water, Sophia stood on the terrace feeling the weight of the past finally lift. She hadn't won by destroying anyone. She had won by remembering herself. And somewhere in New York, a man raised a glass to a woman he once tried to make invisible, now fully seen by the world. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you feel something real, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Your support truly gives me the motivation to keep sharing stories like this. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. The end.